It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story.
Is saying sorry enough? Why haven't you met any sub-postmasters yet?
Fujitsu admits it knew there were errors in the software and witness statements were edited, which helped in the prosecution of hundreds of post office convictions. Accusations the issue is still widespread in Scotland, with one sub-postmistress telling Sky News she's losing money now because of the faulty computer system.
That's the reality of having a post office. That's the reality of it.
Also tonight, detained and humiliated. A woman claims to Sky News that she was stripped and threatened by police officers in Manchester after making a complaint.
I feel like they're going to be after me forever if I don't leave Manchester. I'm scared that what the police are going to do next.
Anger and despair, but a community fighting back as Tata Steel confirms that nearly 3,000 jobs will be cut in Port Talbot. A family of 4, including 2 young girls, are found dead in a house near Norwich. Actor Alec Baldwin is indicted on a charge of involuntary manslaughter over the shooting of a crew member on the film set, Rust.
All systems are go.
And the race is on. Japan becomes the 5th country to land a spacecraft on the moon, but a glitch leaves the mission hanging in the balance. Thus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Fujitsu, the company behind the Horizon software in the post office scandal, has admitted that the company knew about errors as early as November 1999, and witness statements were changed. Hundreds of people have since been wrongly convicted. And today, Sky News has spoken to one sub-postmistress in Scotland who's using an upgraded version of the computer system, which she says is still costing her thousands. We'll get more on that story in a moment. But first, Ivor Bennett reports from the inquiry into the post office scandal.
If Fujitsu was hoping this would shift the spotlight, they may be disappointed. Answers that led to more questions. Is saying sorry enough? Is saying sorry enough?
I've just given quite an extensive evidence to the inquiry. We've got some follow-up to do. We're going to be doing that and make sure that we follow through. Thank you.
Is saying sorry enough? Why haven't you met any sub-postmasters yet? You've been in the job for 5 years. Are you proud to work for Fujitsu? It was Paul Patterson's second time in the hot seat this week, and as he did to MPs, he began by apologising. Fujitsu designed the faulty Horizon system, and its bugs, we now know, were shared with the post office, and Fujitsu knew about them from the start.
All the bugs and errors have been known at one level or not for many, many years, right from the very start of deployment of this system. There were bugs and errors and defects which were well known.
It was an extraordinary admission. Problems with the system the post office treated as sacrosanct for many years after. But it wasn't as extraordinary as what came next. Paul Patterson told this room that witness statements were edited to remove references to the bugs. And these were witness statements given by Fujitsu staff and used in the prosecutions of sub-postmasters, innocent victims who were denied a fair trial because the evidence was incomplete.
And I no doubt you would regard that as shameful.
I would, yes, that would be one word I would use.
What's the other one?
Shameful, appalling. My understanding of how our laws work in this country, that all of the evidence should have been put in front of the sub-postmaster, that the post office was relying on to prosecute them.
Horizon Helpline, thank you for waiting.
Lee Castleton is one of the heroes of the ITV drama, a former sub-postmaster made bankrupt after being taken to court and pursued for more than £300,000.
They should hang their heads in shame, the whole lot of them really. They've conspired to prosecute people for 20 years and it's still, the prosecutions are ongoing, but the prosecutions still stand.
But where Fujitsu said sorry, only silence from those who were at the post office. This was Angela Vanden Bogard, a former top boss. But the cameras and the questions aren't going away. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
To Scotland now, and the Post Office has been accused today of using a computing system which is still failing thousands of people. The Post Office has told Sky News the current software is robust, but it continues to work on improvements. Fujitsu has yet to respond. Sky's Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis reports from Perthshire.
There continues to be bugs. For people to say that it is historic and that there are no glitches in the system is mischievous.
The hangover of a scandal that left deep scars in a discredited post office system where possible problems persist.
The most unexplained thing I had was a discrepancy of, it was a couple of £100 in fact, and I spent the night going through the safe looking at notes. Couldn't find anything, went to bed. I got up in the morning, I redeclared my cash amount and there was no discrepancy, it had vanished.
A mystery for Marlene, who says repeated unexplained shortfalls means she stands to lose everything.
My business is failing. I will go under.
You think that's linked to Horizon?
In part. In part to the discrepancies. My marriage is gone. If it does go under, I'm going to have nowhere to live. My house is above the post office. Yeah. That's the reality of having a post office. That's the reality of it.
Although the original faulty Horizon system that was linked to so much misery has now been overhauled and the risk of unwarranted prosecution has been lifted, there is a sense among postmasters across the UK that history could be repeating itself.
4, please. Thank you.
Sarah represents around 1,000 postmasters and alleges IT issues are still widespread.
There's plenty of times that they can't account for where the mistakes are coming from. They've checked CCTV, they've checked transaction logs, and they don't know where they're coming from. I'm sure the system has improved from 2015, but it's still happening. It's still having issues. There's still plenty of people who are having sleepless nights. There's probably not a postmaster in the country who hasn't had some kind of issue with Horizon.
The Post Office says the current version of the system has been found to be robust relative to comparable systems, but they say they are not at all complacent. Officials have said sorry to Marlene, but they did not deny the allegations that lingering issues are still causing headaches. Conor Gillis, Sky News, Perthshire.
A woman has told Sky News that she was strip-searched by Greater Manchester Police and threatened by officers after complaining that a child sex offence was not being investigated properly. The police service has been accused of targeting Danny Stewart because they saw her as a threat. The testimony will form part of a review commissioned by the city's mayor, Andy Burnham, after Sky's reporting on the issue last year. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, reports.
Right, Danica, the time's 10:42. You're under arrest on suspicion of blackmail and...
Danica Stewart's arrest in October 2022, captured on police body cam.
Well, your phone's being seized.
She believes this happened because she'd complained about the police.
That's it.
Today, Danica is taking me back to where she was arrested. Her story began when she reported an alleged sexual crime committed against a young person, but complained to the police watchdog that it wasn't being properly investigated. She told them she'd recorded a police officer admitting failures. 3 months later, she was told police wanted to speak to her, so came here to Pendleton Police Station in Manchester.
And these all coppers stood here and they've arrested me and put me in a van which was here.
In custody, she was told the man she'd accused of a sex crime had accused her of blackmail. Then, inside a police cell, she was told to strip naked.
So I took my tracksuit bottoms off, which I knew they were going to take away from me anyway, and I've took my leggings off, and then I've took my knickers off, so I'm just sat there naked.
So why do you think they strip-searched you?
It's power, because when I left the police station that day, the sergeant on the desk said to me, you need to drop all your complaints against the police. They needed to show me who was boss.
Danica's testimony will now form part of a wider review into the treatment of women in police custody, commissioned by Manchester's mayor in the wake of a Sky News investigation last year into claims of unwarranted strip searches. And we understand that when published, that review will strongly criticise the police complaint system.
Danica filed another complaint, this time about her strip search. An internal police investigation claimed she hadn't been strip searched. She asked Greater Manchester Authority to review this, and they found the internal investigator hadn't actually watched the CCTV of her time in custody. Danica repeatedly applied for her right to be given the footage and was eventually told it had been corrupted.
Danica became a target of that police force. She was seen as trouble. She was seen as a threat to Greater Manchester Police. And what they did, they decided they were going to go and lock her up. And just like in the post office, it is about concealing what is going on. It is trying to protect the reputation of an organisation that is a very powerful public body.
Danica says the problem is that the complaint system through the independent watchdog website go directly to the force themselves, in one instance to the officer she was complaining about.
If there was an actually robust and fit-for-purpose complaint system, the police wouldn't have known about the complaints that I was placing. Them complaints should have been investigated by an independent body.
In response, Greater Manchester Police said they're driven to fight, prevent and reduce crime to keep people safe and care for victims. Where we're not successful, we admit our failings and we work transparently within governance and regulatory arrangements to redress what has gone wrong. Ms Stewart's complaints continue to be reviewed by Dame Vera Baird and the Professional Standards Directorate. Until these reviews have concluded and reported their findings to Ms Stewart, it wouldn't be right for the force to comment publicly. The force says they provided Ms Stewart with information to some of her allegations and she's welcome to contact Professional Standards for updates.
I feel like they're going to be after me forever if I don't leave Manchester. I'm scared that what the police are going to do next.
She has not only lost faith in the police, she sees them as the enemy. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Tata Steel has confirmed today that up to 2,800 jobs will go when it shuts down its 2 blast furnaces at Port Talbot as part of its transition towards greener energy. It's a huge blow to the coastal town, which has relied on the plant as a source of income. Well, steel was once a major industry in the UK, but the news of thousands of layoffs in Port Talbot is a continuation of a sharp decline in the last 50 years. In 1971, there were 320,000 people employed in steel. 50 years later, that had dropped by almost 90% to less than 40,000. And now, major increases in production in Asia has significantly overtaken the industry here. In 2020, steel still contributed £2 billion to the UK economy. And between 2013 and 2023, the UK government invested more than £1 billion into the UK steel industry, including committing $500 million to Tata last year to assist transition to greener methods of production. Our business correspondent, Adele Robinson, reports from Port Talbot.
This is more than an iconic skyline for Port Talbot.
Without the steelworks behind us, we'll be absolutely like a ghost town.
It represents a century of steel making.
Devastated, desperate, uncertain and overnight, to be perfectly honest, very hungry.
And the lives intertwined with it. Now all that will disappear with the closure of 2 blast furnaces and the loss of 2,800 jobs. Gary's been here for 37 years.
It's a way of life. We're steel men and women. We know nothing else. Empty, heartbroken feeling, to be honest with you. There's no one in this town and the surrounding communities who don't have someone involved in this. What are we going to do?
And Andrew's dad worked here like him too.
Emotionally, I'm a 3rd generation, and to me, we've all got a tie to it. Even though I'm from the valleys, I'm a steel worker, it's in my blood. That is part of the heritage. 100 years of steel making is about to end you unless we stop it.
Part of plans to cut emissions. A new electric arc furnace will make no longer new, but recycled steel from scrap. A financial decision, say the Indian owners Tata Steel, as well as a green one.
It's a difficult day. We appreciate that. I think we've had these conversations with the unions, particularly over the last 4 months. They're not happy with the outcome, that's clear. We do believe that the proposed way forward is the best way forward to secure the future of the site.
And with money from the UK government to help.
We are absolutely committed to steel making in the UK, and that's why the government provided £500 million to support Tata. The alternative, by the way, was that the entire plant would be closed and all 8,000 jobs would be lost.
This community exists because of these blast furnaces, and for multiple generations it's all they've known. But it's not just about the people here, it's about the future of UK steelmaking. Tata Steel argue that their plans help secure that. Unions say the opposite.
They're worried the UK will become more reliant on imports, but the more immediate concern, decimating a community.
If our members tell us they want to take industrial action, then that's what we'll do. They've got kids, all they want to do is feed their family and have a good life, and that's being taken away from them.
So how much is the sentiment, we will not accept this?
We won't. Yeah, we have no option but to fight. If we have to, we will. We hope Tata will change their mind. We hope the government will put more money in.
A piece of steelmaking history is about to be lost here. That was perhaps inevitable.
Nobody can imagine this place not being here. It's not in the community, this place is the community.
For unions, the fight is far from over. Adele Robinson, Sky News, Port Talbot.
Police have launched an investigation after 4 people from the same family were found dead at a house near Norwich. Officers forced their way into the house in Cossey shortly before 7 o'clock this morning, following a call from a member of the public. The bodies of 2 young girls, a 45-year-old man and a 36-year-old woman, were found inside. Our correspondent, Halyna Hutchins, reports.
A family tragedy and no explanation. This house in the town of Cossey on the outskirts of Norwich is the focus of a police investigation after the bodies of a 45-year-old man, a 36-year-old woman and 2 young girls were found inside.
We believe there are injuries at the moment. You'll appreciate this is really early on in the investigation, and we've got a forensic examination going on at the scene to understand what that actually means. And furthermore, we will be doing Home Office post-mortems to understand any causes of death.
A passerby called the police just after 7 on Friday morning. Officers forced their way in and found the bodies. Hours later, and the lights are still on inside. The neighbours are stunned.
It's just a really shocking sort of incident. It's a really strange time. This place is so quiet. It's a really nice place to live. And to have this on our doorstep is just absolutely, it's beyond belief, really.
It's understood the man lived here with the 2 young girls and the woman had been visiting. Mystery surrounds this cul-de-sac. We've learnt today that police had been in contact with the residents of this property back in December regarding a missing persons inquiry. Officers are trying to establish if the 2 incidents are connected. There are lots of questions that investigators are asking, all in the hope of answering just how 4 family members ended up losing their lives in suburban Norwich. Halyna Hutchins, Sky News.
A grand jury in the United States has indicted actor Alec Baldwin tonight over the fatal shooting on the film set of Rust in New Mexico. He now faces a charge of involuntary manslaughter. Let's speak to our US correspondent, James Matthews. So bring us up to date, James. What does this mean now for the actor?
Hi, Gillian. That means that he is facing very serious criminal charges, involuntary manslaughter. You'll remember this story goes back to October 2021. That's when Alec Baldwin was the lead actor and co-producer on the set of the film Rust. It was rehearsals. He had a gun in his hand. That gun went off, killing the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins and the film's director. Alec Baldwin always said that he had pulled the hammer, the part of a gun that one typically pulls back with the thumb, but he hadn't pulled the trigger. Charges were laid against him, charges were dropped last April, but now, after fresh tests on the pistol, investigators believe that the trigger was indeed pulled. That's where the evidence is pointing, and therefore they presented this new evidence to the grand jury, and they have laid charges of involuntary manslaughter. The family of the woman who died, lawyers for them say that they welcome developments because they have always wanted to know the truth of what happened on that fatal day. We haven't heard from Alec Baldwin himself, but in a brief statement, his lawyers say, "We look forward to our day in court."
James, thank you. Doctors have issued a warning that measles is likely to spread rapidly across the UK unless there's a concerted effort to vaccinate more people. The West Midlands has declared a national incident, with the number of cases rising and concern about vaccine hesitancy. Our communities correspondent Becky Johnson reports from Birmingham.
Ellie Roscoe has been left with ongoing health problems after becoming seriously ill with measles.
I thought we wouldn't get through it. That's the truth. She was delirious. Her body was covered in the rash, which you couldn't touch her skin.
She wasn't fully vaccinated as a child. Her mother had been concerned that the MMR jab caused autism, a health scare that's since been disproven.
Am I risking measles or autism? And I thought at the time that the autism was far worse than the measles.
It was me in my situation with having gone through measles. If I was having children, I would vaccinate them because it is a dreadful illness.
They live in Birmingham, which has seen the largest number of cases in this recent outbreak. Schools have been urging parents to get children vaccinated.
I think if you've got the children vaccinated, we should be quite safe, isn't it? I think parents that haven't have got something to worry about.
Parts of London, too, have seen a rise in cases. This child's mother didn't want to be identified, but told us why she won't let her children have the vaccine.
I do not like it. The ingredients they had in there, the stuff they had in there, and after actually researching and seeing many stories of how parents have actually vaccinated their kids and seeing how it actually affected them.
MMR vaccine uptake has fallen right across the country. We're being warned measles could spread across other towns and cities. The number of cases has grown so rapidly that the UK Health Security Agency has now declared a national incident, meaning they'll focus resources on trying to limit the outbreak and targeting those most at risk. This lab in Birmingham is where all the latest cases are being confirmed.
There will be very different and cultural or religious or other reasons why people have not been vaccinated to this point. Now, some of them may not have been offered it. So, for example, a refugee from a country may never have been offered a vaccination.
But health officials face a combination of misinformation, cultural and religious concerns, and post-pandemic vaccine hesitancy. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Birmingham.
A newborn baby girl is in hospital this evening after being found in a shopping bag on the streets of East London when she was less than an hour old. She was found by a passerby last night who kept her warm until paramedics arrived. The baby, who's been named Elsa, was uninjured and is safe and well. Police have appealed for the mother to come forward.
If you are the baby's mother, please know that your daughter is well. No matter what your circumstances, please do seek help by dialling 999.
The Duke of Sussex has withdrawn his libel claim against the publisher of the Mail on Sunday. Prince Harry was suing over a 2022 article about him challenging the Home Office for altering funding for his security. The Prime Minister has been challenged by a member of the public over the state of the NHS today. Rishi Sunak was walking through Winchester when he was asked why the strikes were so prevalent.
Made you feel good about the future. So last year, towards the end of the year, we had 2 months with virtually no strikes in October and November.
Well, that was a fortunate thing.
And do you know what happened? The waiting list fell by 150,000 over those 2 months. And it just shows that when there aren't strikes, we really can make progress. So we didn't last year because of all the strikes, but
you
hopefully...
could stop it all. You could make it all go back to how it used to be. Where we had, not literally,
no, yeah.
but where
Yeah.
we had, if you had a problem, you could go to the hospital. My daughter spent 7 hours waiting.
I'm sorry to hear that. But as I say, the key thing is that we have resolved all the industrial action in the
I
NHS,
hope so.
apart from the junior doctors who have are still not saying yes. But everyone else has said yes, so which is good.
I'm about to put a billion.
It was 55 years ago that man first landed on the moon, and now the space race is back on. Japan made history today after successfully landing the moon snipe on the moon, becoming only the 5th country to ever achieve such a feat. But has it all gone to plan? Here's our science and technology editor, Tom Clark.
With the slim lander, Japan has made space history, becoming the 5th nation to execute a soft touchdown on the lunar surface. But you can tell from the faces at Mission Control that while they made the landing, they didn't exactly nail it.
The solar cell is not generating electricity at this point in time.
What went wrong? Possibly the lander failed to settle the right way up, like in this animation, and its solar panels are pointing at the lunar surface instead of the sun. But they're talking to their probe, and it successfully deployed 2 miniature rovers equipped with cameras which could, in the coming days, reveal what's happened and whether it achieved its key objective, demonstrating a precise landing for future lunar prospecting.
While moon rock might not look very exciting, it contains rare minerals and also, on certain parts of the moon's surface, water ice. And if you want to exploit that for a future lunar base, for example, you need to land as close as possible to where those mineral deposits are. And it's that accuracy that the SLIM mission is trying to demonstrate.
Unless they can restore power, it's unlikely SLIM will be able to fulfil its mission. But JAXA, Japan's space agency, has done better than others in the current race for the moon. In May, a privately funded Japanese probe crashed. In August, Russia's Luna 25 also failed to stick its landing. Days later, India's Chandrayaan-3 ended the run of bad luck, successfully touching down. But this week, a commercial American mission fell back to Earth, never making it to the moon. But there are more to follow.
It's become marginally more affordable to send things to space, not just because there are more rockets and more capacity to launch things now, but also because computer equipment has gotten so much better.
Japan has joined an exclusive club of lunar pioneers, but it could be weeks before we know just how successful it's been. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Teenage darts sensation Luke Littler beat Michael van Gerwen 8-5 to win the Bahrain Masters title. Littler was making his debut at the World Series competition and threw a 9-darter in a quarter-final win against Nathan Aspinall. It's Littler's first senior PDC title after coming up short against Luke Humphreys in the World Darts final earlier this month. Well, he's made up for it now. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this story on the front of the Mail, their headline, UK gripped by measles crisis. We'll be right back. Do stay with us. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Just want to bring you some breaking news that's just come into us. This via the news wires, and it reads that as part of ongoing efforts to protect freedom of navigation and prevent attacks on maritime vessels, US Navy ships are present in the Red Sea. And at 6:45 p.m, this is Sana time in Yemen, US Central Command forces conducted strikes against 3 Houthi anti-ship missiles that were aimed into the southern Red Sea and were prepared to launch. US forces identified the missiles in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen and determined that they presented an imminent threat to merchant vessels and the US Navy ships in the region. US forces subsequently struck and destroyed the missiles in self-defence. This action will make international waters safe and secure for US Navy vessels and merchant vessels. So that's the breaking news coming into us at this point. We've got that confirmed by US Central Command that has taken place this evening. There's also an update on President Biden, who has been in talks with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's spoken with the Prime Minister yesterday, excuse me, and for the first time in nearly a month, he's spoken about Israel's ongoing strikes in Gaza and the differences over a future Palestinian state, which he says that he can see the possibility of a two-state solution. So those two related pieces of breaking news coming into us this evening, that of the strike on 3 Houthi terrorist anti-ship missiles and President Biden's comments following a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu today. We'll, of course, keep you updated on those stories, but for now, you are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and the Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The final betrayal, that's how the Mirror describes news that Tata Steel is to shed almost 3,000 jobs at its Port Talbot plant in South Wales, despite getting £500 million in government aid. UK gripped by measles crisis is the lead story in the Mail, which reports that an urgent vaccination programme is needed to ward off a growing wave of measles outbreaks. The Telegraph reports that the Home Office has been quietly granting Channel asylum seekers work permits in care, construction and farming, despite its plan to send many others to Rwanda. The Eye carries a poll suggesting only 23% of respondents believe the government's Rwanda migration policy will discourage small boat crossings in the Channel, while 50% believe it won't. The Times leads with fears expressed by generals that the UK's shrinking army may leave it unable to function as a top-level fighting force. The Guardian reveals that what it calls vital legal protections for the environment and human health are being lost as the government scraps EU legislation following Brexit. The Financial Times reports that the Office for Budget Responsibility is poised to tell the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, that he is in a position to offer tax cuts before the next election. The Express speaks exclusively to assisted dying campaigner Dame Esther Ranson, who makes an impassioned plea for MPs to debate changing the law to make the process easier for patients and families. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Henry Hill and Susie Boniface. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the Mirror and the top story today, those Tata job losses. You take us into this, as it's your paper, Susie.
I wish it was my paper, sad it's owned by someone else. Shareholders mostly. Yeah, so this is the fact that, as the Mirror's reporting there, that the government has it's been announced on the same day that Tata Steel in Port Talbot is going to shed about a quarter of its jobs close a couple of furnaces that are making steel within Britain, fresh new steel, using coal, and going to replace it with furnaces which are more carbon friendly and use electricity but can't make the same kind of steel, that make steel from scrap that just isn't as good, and they're going to lose 3,000 jobs. And at the same time, the British government has given them a bung of £500 million. And what it really shows, apart from the fact that a load of that stuff is questionable and problematic and we could argue about it, aside from that, it shows some really poor political nous and messaging within Downing Street that they allowed those two facts to be announced on the same day. Because if you had any sense at all, you would let Tata announce the job losses one day, and on the next day you'd say, we've given them £500 million to protect the rest. Now, what's happened instead is, because they've come out at the same time, all anybody is ever going to remember is £500 million bung and 3,000 job losses. And when Rishi Sunak's been out today giving interviews saying, oh, but with that money, we've saved the other jobs, and without that, blah, blah, it's too late. You know, the fact that the government's given a bung and the jobs have been lost has become part of the mythology of what's happened in South Wales as a result of huge global factors. But it's just been so badly handled by Downing Street. They could and should have just messaged it better. Never mind, actually concentrated on fixing some of these issues rather than worrying about small boats and immigration and other old tripe. This matters more to the people in South Wales, and it's been absolutely mishandled in every possible way.
And Henry, what the government would say is that they've prevented the closure of the entire plant. So actually, it is good news. But as Susie says, the unions are saying Number 10 give Tata £500 million to throw 3,000 workers on the scrap heap.
Yeah, I mean, Susie's entirely right that it is abysmal political messaging. You could have staggered it better. I think she's too kind on the government by blaming this entirely on global factors, though. The UK is now going to be, I think, the only one of the world's 20 largest economies that doesn't have the domestic ability to make fresh steel, virgin steel. This is at the same time as we're in a news cycle where politicians are sort of solemnly warning us that we need to be ready for a major war with Russia or another power within sort of 10, 20 years. OK, steel is a key strategic industry. We now don't have it. And a big part of the contributing factor for this is the fact that the UK has uniquely high energy bills because our energy policy has been so badly mismanaged. In other countries, heavy manufacturing like steel is simply more viable because electricity and power is so much cheaper. So actually, and also the government insisted on the bailout package for Tata that the plant itself had to be subject to net zero commitments. Now, that's absurd. I'm a supporter of net zero, but fundamentally we need virgin steel. So all that's going to happen now is we've essentially offshored the carbon. It's going to be manufactured somewhere else and then imported here. But the plant itself will be running these arc furnaces, and so the plant will be cheaper. This is an industrial policy failure on an epic scale.
And it all means that that steel that we need to buy in to build net zero infrastructure, to build cars, to build solar panels, to build nuclear power plants is all going to be more expensive when we have to ship it in from somewhere else.
And create jobs somewhere else.
But even the workers acknowledge that the industry has to be greener and there has to be a transition, though, don't they?
But you can't transition to a clean way of making virgin steel. That technology currently doesn't exist. Net zero is important, and it's important that we find cleaner ways to do things that we can do in cleaner ways, cleaning the grid by moving towards green energy, for example. But making virgin steel requires blast furnaces and requires coking coal. There's simply not a green way of making it. So there isn't a green transition to be made for steel yet. It might be that in the future we come up with a new technology, but at the moment, this is a form of carbon emission that human civilization cannot and will not do without. All that's happened is we no longer have that capacity and those jobs in South Wales.
No, I think what they have said is that, you know, at least if it were staggered, but it's the number of losses in one fell swoop. Let's move on to the Mail, and this Measles outbreak, a national incident declared because many people not vaccinated, their children. There is a reticence to do so historically, and really there are going to be consequences.
There already are consequences. There are people die as a result of measles infections. In the 1950s, there were maybe sort of 500,000, 750,000 people a year catching measles, and most of those people probably aren't with us anymore. And generations have grown up with the measles vaccine, completely unaware of the damage and the harm and the risk and the terror that it causes. Measles is so contagious that if you walk into a room several hours after someone with measles coughed in it, then you can catch it. It infects 15 people from every one person on average. It causes encephalitis, swelling of the brain. It can cause pneumonia. Even if you get a very light dose of it, as my mother did when she was a girl, you're 3 weeks in bed. No devices, no daylight, no nothing, no television, you know, you're just there with the covers over your eyes. It's really serious, and there's generations have grown up unaware of that. There's a generation of young adults now who are reaching adulthood who probably weren't vaccinated because of the stupid Andrew Wakefield scare stories in the 90s, and probably may not even be aware that they never had the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine. If you catch rubella as an adult, you feel a bit ropey, but if you pass it on to a pregnant woman, she's going to have a deformed baby. It really matters. If people aren't aware whether they have an MMR vaccine or not, they need to check. And if you don't have one, or your children don't have one, it needs to be given. And unfortunately, you know, there are lots of public health experts who say, look, you can't force people to have vaccines. It doesn't work. They react badly to it. You've got to coax them and persuade and all the rest of it and hold their hands. And yes, and that's the way that works, and that's what they're trying, but it's not good enough because it's not working, is it? So people are catching it. People are dying today. And I wrote a column about this today. I genuinely believe that anyone who is willfully refusing to let their child get vaccinated without valid medical reasons should be prosecuted for child cruelty, because that's what it is. And it's not just cruelty to your own children, it's to other children who can't get the vaccines because they're immunosuppressed for some reason. It's a dreadful thing to do, to not get the vaccines when they're safe. We've had it for 63 years. There's no earthly reason not to get your children vaccinated.
Well, Britain was declared measles-free by the World Health Organization in 2016. I mean, Henry, do you think that there should be or there should be more public health information, than we should be seeing films about the dangers of measles? Because, as Susie rightly points out, there is a whole generation that's unaware of what this disease can do.
Absolutely, that sounds like a very sensible first step. I mean, the challenge with this as well, it doesn't say so on the front page, but it says so in the story, is that this is a geographically concentrated problem. The West Midlands and London are the two areas where it's biggest, and it's partly the Andrew Wakefield nonsense, but it's also, they say, there's sort of religious and cultural barriers in some communities towards getting the vaccine, and so you need to make sure, I think, that as Britain becomes more diverse, that your public health messaging is actually reaching everyone, because the same messaging won't work for every group or every group of people. And it's not, as Susie says, it's not just about making sure that those children are protected. Vaccination is a shield that depends on mass take-up, because once you get cracks in it and you start getting people contracting the disease seriously, that protection can break down. So this is a really urgent issue that we need to get in front of.
To the eye and migration, only 1 in 5 voters thinks Rishi Sunak will ever send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Surprise?
No. It's kind of astonishing to me that he's put all his political eggs in this basket and is spending all his political capital on it, because surveys have shown that the only people who really hugely care about the Rwanda issue and small boats and so on are about 30% of Conservative voters, which means 2/3 of Tory voters don't care about it as much, don't think it's their #1 priority. It means that the Labour and Lib Dem voters that he needs to try and bring over and build a coalition of, as Boris Johnson did in 2019, they're not having it as their top priority either. And if it's not their top priority, why is it his top priority? And most people, they're fully aware, look, it's not going to work, because the reason people are coming is not because they don't have to go to Rwanda when they get here, you know, and it's not going to stop the fact that they're coming because where they're coming from has got huge economic inequality and climate problems, and that's why they're moving all around the world from and to countries globally. It's not just our problem, and this is not the solution by any means, but he's just put all his eggs in this one basket, which is least likely to be able to hold eggs.
Henry, do you have any insight as to why he's perhaps chosen this as the hill to die on?
I think there's two things that have contributed to this. The first is that the government genuinely thought the Rwanda scheme would be easier to do than it has proven. The original scheme, they designed specifically so it would hold up in court. They actually won in the High Court. They then lost in the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. So they ended up backed into a corner because they'd already sort of put quite a lot on Rwanda, and then they had to overcome the Supreme Court judgment, which means this bill. The other problem is that the Tories, you know, they're behind on economics. There's not that much blue water between them and Labour on a lot of issues. And immigration is one thing where they think that that's a good issue for them in a defensive general election to shore up the Conservative coalition. The problem is they can't talk about legal migration because they've been running one of the most laissez-faire immigration policies in modern British history, and we had a net inflow of 745,000 people last year, which means they can only talk about illegal immigration, and that means that you can only really talk about Rwanda. And the only tactical advantage they get out of this is that it is actually it's a really intractable problem. What do you do about people who are coming here illegally? How do you make the system effective in getting rid of people who shouldn't be here? And Labour do not have an answer. The problem is that the Tory answer isn't very good, but it's at least, they think, better than nothing. But it's not a great position to be in. But if you want to run an immigration and you are importing more people per year than any government in modern British history, small boats is what you've got. And so we're going to keep hearing about Rwanda from now until the election.
Susie, the National Crime Agency is saying this week that the deterrent's the only thing that will work in terms of stopping people coming into this country illegally.
But that's what governments have been saying, I think, the entirety of my adult life. I can remember David Blunkett as Labour Home Secretary going, we need to give them a deterrent impact. I know, we'll stop them working when they get here. It didn't make any marked difference whatsoever.
Well, on that, which takes us to our next story, front page of The Telegraph. Channel migrants have been quietly given the right to work in sectors including care, construction and agriculture and can still retain access to state-subsidised bed and board under a Home Office scheme.
Yeah. So as David Blunkett suggested that, ruled out, stopped that working in 2002 and in one fell swoop made asylum seekers a group of people who could be part of a community and integrate and pay taxes while they're waiting to have their status decided, turn them into a cost to the state that had to be housed and given subsistence payments and so on and so forth, and separated them as well. It made a lot of the problems we've got now. But there was a rule brought in that if it took more than a year to decide your status, then you could be allowed to work. And that seems fair enough, because it takes more than a year just living in a hostel. You need to let someone out and give them some fresh air. And what's happened is, because the problems in our asylum system are so immense and they haven't been processing people, more and more people have gone over that 1 year limit. And so again, this is a fault of Conservative policy and successive Tory Home Secretaries and some Labour ones before to just slow down the process and not deal with the asylum process properly.
Susie, we must leave it there. Sorry, Henry. We get plenty of time after the break. We're going to take a break. Coming up, the Chancellor has apparently been given the green light to offer tax cuts before the next election. We'll discuss that next.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world, the likes of Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Sir Elton John. We try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I'm based in Belfast, a city transformed by peace, but still struggling with its past. Politically, the two sides are as far apart as ever, and it's over that question of who has sovereignty in Northern Ireland, the very issue that's been the source of tension here for generations. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 25 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
We help you understand the world with us.
Today, we have reached an agreement with the Conservative Party on support for government in Parliament.
We already know what the government gets out of this deal. What exactly does the DUP get out of it? Well, £1.5 billion. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. You can't live in a place like this and not appreciate the environment.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Henry Hill and Susie Boniface. Right, this section we're going to have a look at the front page of the FT, which suggests that Jeremy Hunt is going to be given the green light on tax cuts, on the tax cuts that he wants to share with the population. Take us into this story, Henry.
Yeah, so this basically is the OBR saying that because the cost of borrowing is set to fall, i.e. the cost of servicing the vast amount of government debt, there will be potentially up to £6 to £10 billion worth of so-called headroom for Jeremy Hunt versus the original projections that he had, and that is money, in theory, that the Chancellor can put into cutting taxes before the election. And that's exactly what they're planning to do. We don't know exactly how yet, but the other interesting thing in this story is that Jeremy Hunt has said there might be two fiscal events this year. There's going to be the budget in March, but there may also be one in the autumn, and if there is one in the autumn, that is basically going to be, presumably, immediately pre-election, just a shop window budget. The OBR is a bit of a sort of shadow dance in a way, because the government created £30 billion worth of fiscal headroom by basically shunting £30 billion worth of cuts into 2025-6, which are never going to happen. But because they say they're going to happen and the OBR is obliged to take the government at its word, the government can say, well, we're going to make all those cuts in the future, so we've got some room to make tax cuts now, and the OBR says yes. This looks a little bit more solid in that the cost of borrowing presumably will actually fall, so that will give them some more room, and the government... Taxes are at historic highs, and the problem the government has is that they're trying to scaremonger about Labour's tax policies. But in 1992, when that really worked, taxes were low. Whatever else you thought about the country, taxes were genuinely low. Taxes are now very high, and that means that messaging about Labour isn't cutting through.
Yes, and as you say, Jeremy Hunt open to the possibility of holding a second fiscal event in the autumn that could allow him to cut taxes again if the economy improves. Now, just because of time, we're going to go to rhubarb, because I know you've got an interest, a special interest in this story, Susie. I did not know this, that rhubarb is best when it's picked by candlelight.
Yes. So this is the front page of the Yorkshire Post, which has got this fantastic picture of a chap called Robert Tomlinson, who's picking rhubarb by candlelight in his farm in Pudsey, just outside Leeds, in what is known as the rhubarb triangle, which is a fascinating bit of history. Google it, kids, if you're at home. So... What they do in this part of the world, and they have done for a very long time, there's only 10 growers left that do this, and Robert's one of them, but they take rhubarb outside for 2 years, let it grow, leave it alone, bring it into sheds, and then harvest it from Christmas to Easter in the complete darkness when it is sweeter and more beautiful. Amazing. They used to compost it with human waste. It's just fantastic.
She's so enthusiastic.
Fascinating.
She grows her own rhubarb.
Fascinating.
Susie and Henry, thank you very much. Do stay with us for the next hour. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Will all change this weekend as snow and ice are replaced by wind and rain with the arrival of Storm Aisha on Sunday. Overnight cloud and rain will spread across Ireland into western parts of Britain by Saturday morning, bringing an ice risk and hill snow to parts of Scotland. Much of England and Wales will be cold and dry with patchy freezing fog.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.